And now, I have a sermon for all of you, but first, I love it. That's just a joke and you start laughing in advance. One day I should tell... One day I should tell a joke backwards. You know how you tell a joke backwards? Start laughing first. Now I have a different one. I heard about this one. There was this man who overheard a conversation in a shopping center, at the mall. There was one of these tables, before the holidays, that there are a bunch of volunteers wrapping presents. And he heard this man who was telling a woman next to him, he was saying, "Oh, I'm just terrible at wrapping presents." "Oh, come on, it can't be that bad." He said, "Yeah, I'm terrible." So the woman said, "Okay, but whatever." I said, "Who is getting that basketball?" I said, "Come on, it's a book." I want to talk to you today about dangerous goods labels. Have you ever seen these dangerous good labels? In fact, you can Google it. There are some standards that they are universal. That there are certain symbols that in some cases you are obligated by law to place them over the right elements, okay? Why you have to do that? Not only to obey the law, but also to communicate to everybody the specific type of danger associated with the object. And why you do that? So people will know, and they don't have to guess, people will know right away how to handle the object, right? And in some extreme cases, that can even protect somebody's life. Right? Remember, you probably all remember, sometimes you see these symbols, radioactive. What do you do if something is radioactive? You take your distance. Something that is flammable. Well, be careful how you handle that. It's flammable. You don't want to get too close to that. It may be dangerous, explosive. As far away as possible. And that's fine. That's fine. And it's good that we use that when we are talking about objects. But there is a problem when we start using labels to label people. And that is something extremely dangerous because we have no idea the consequences that could have. And I want to say that sometimes the reason we believe that we should use labels on other people are exactly the same. So people will know how to handle them, or people will take distance from them because they're dangerous or something. And usually, and maybe it should be a sermon for another day, the labels we use on people are the things that upset the most about them to us. Okay? But Judaism is very specific in the sense that we should avoid using labels on people. Now, this is the thing. I was reflecting on this topic of the labels on people, and I realized that there are 3 situations in where labeling people are involved. 3 situations. Number 1, it's you putting labels on somebody else. Number 2, somebody else will try to put a label on you. And situation number 3, when you put a label on yourself. And this is bad in all of the above. We have to try to avoid, by all means, to fall into that trap. Let's look at this week's Parsha, because it's very interesting what happened. Even though we didn't read it, because it's kind of at the beginning of the Parsha, and we are cycle number 3, so we don't read the first third. And this is when Joseph's brothers wanted to kill him, remember, and they ended up selling him as a slave. But I remember at the beginning when Jacob said to Joseph, "Go see where your brothers are." Okay? By the way, that is a beautiful label that we have. When we label everybody as brothers and sisters. Another beautiful label is when we label everybody God's creations. But in this one, the brothers of Joseph, when they saw him coming, are using a terrible label for a very mean and evil reason. They said, Hine, Baal Achalomot halazeba. Ha! Look, the dreamer, sorry, not just the dreamer, that dreamer is coming. So that was the label, the dreamer. He wasn't a person anymore. He wasn't a brother anymore. The label, he was a dreamer. And when they labeled Joseph as the dreamer, I read some beautiful comments from rabbis. Said that was the beginning of the end. Because that dehumanization that they did with Joseph, what allowed them to sell him as slave. He's not a person anymore. He's a dreamer. A person, I can't harm. A dreamer, I can get rid of a dreamer. And that is what, unfortunately, what labels do to relationships. And this is very common, more common than you may think. And I hear this all the time. People calling each other names, labeling people when they said, the lazy, the slowpoke, the nerd. He's trash. He's useless. Those are the kind of labels that Joseph brothers used back then. And it's very clear that we should avoid that at all cost. But then there is another situation. And the other situation is with somebody else is trying to put a label on you. And that may affect your life. Because if you let them do that, then all of a sudden you start thinking less about yourself. Sometimes you start losing your own humanity. You start forgetting that you are God's creation. You start forgetting that you are a brother or a sister. And you start believing the lies of other people trying to impose on you. And there are very famous cases of this, and especially of people who didn't allow others to label them. The most famous case that I can remember was Walt Disney, for example. You know, that he was told, Walt Disney was told, you have no imagination. Believe it or not. Winston Churchill, you know that he flunked the 6th grade? And he said, there is no future for you. Albert Einstein, forget about school, it's not for you. Your brain can't handle that. And they all had one thing in common. They were able to remove those negative labels, and they went to do great things with their lives. But it was up to them to recognize that other people were trying to limit them and to remove that, and to then, and only then, they were able to do great things. Joseph was the same. Joseph was the same. I don't know if it was instant, and I don't know if he took some reflection from him, but he realized that he wouldn't allow his brothers to limit him by putting him a label. He wasn't a dreamer. When he realized that he was much more than that, he went to do great things with his life. But then there is the other one. And this is the most difficult to recognize, but this is something that we should all try to figure out and also to handle it. And it's when we are the one putting labels on ourselves. And we have plenty of examples of this too. Perhaps the most famous one was Moses. When God said to Moses, you're going to be the deliverer. God spoke to Pharaoh. And Moses said, I can't. I can't speak. That was a label that he put to himself. A limitation that he put on himself. Because we know that Moses had no problem to speak. In fact, the book of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Bible, the whole book, I don't know if you realize, they're not the words of God. They are the words of Moses. The whole book of Deuteronomy is a speech A beautiful speech from Moses to the people of Israel. And you're trying to tell me that you don't know how to speak? You spoke for a whole day before you died, and it was beautiful. So what happened is, maybe later in life, Moses realized that, he put a label on himself, and that almost limited what he could do. The other one, I don't know if you're so familiar, but it was the prophet Jeremiah. You know what happened with Jeremiah? When God appointed Jeremiah as a prophet, the people of Israel, you know what Jeremiah said? I can't, I'm too young. I'm too young to do it. And this is something, also a label that many people did. No, sorry, I cannot do it, I'm too young. I have no experience. I'm not talented enough. Believe me, those are self-imposed labels. Those are things that we have to remove the same way that we have to remove labels that other people are trying to put on us. Because we have to remember at all times that we are brothers, sisters, but also we are God's creation. We are God's image. And we have greatness inside. So we should never think about ourselves too young, no experience, no talent. It's amazing. So this parsha is a reminder of the dangers of labeling people. Dangers, as we saw, that somebody, because of calling people's name, was able to sell Joseph as a slave. But we see it in this day in society as well. Why do you think we have attacks like we see on the news in Montreal, in Toronto, to synagogues, to Jewish schools? Why do you think that happened? Because that came after, unfortunately, the media kept labeling the Jews as evil. The one killing, these ones, they're killing Palestinians. And the one hating Arabs. And all those labels eventually have the effect and say, no, they're not people. They're less than humans. So everything is possible. And there you can see the dangers of labels. And we have to be very careful, because that's the beginning of the end. The same way of this parsha was the beginning of the end, because the brothers of Joseph used labels on him. So if there is something that we should learn from this parsha, is that actually three things. Number one, be a good example. Never put labels on people. Number two, be a good example. If you see somebody who is down or who feels less about themselves because somebody else put a label on them, help them figure out how great they are. And number three, do it to yourself. Remove the labels that you self-impose to yourself that you know they are limiting you. And by all means, never, ever allowed the thing of calling names, because what we get with that is dehumanization. And when we allow that to happen, only bad thing will follow, as we could see in this generation. Joseph dealt with that thousands of years ago. Fortunately for him, he was strong enough to endure that and to make a difference. Now is our time to be strong and to create a society that can eliminate labels, that they are nothing that bring negativity to the world. Shabbat Shalom.